So I, 27 male, have a sister who's a few years older than I am. I'm not sure how old she is now, as we have as little contact as possible. For as long as I have been alive, I can say that she is responsible for 99% of the problems my family and I have had. I have 2 brothers and a mother. My father was an alcoholic who drank us out of our first home, a story for another day, I guess. But due to that, we moved in with my grandparents. Well, that is except for my sister, who moved in with her godmother for reasons at the time I was completely unaware of. It turns out my nan had already figured out what she was like and didn't want her in her home. I am the youngest of my siblings. My brother, 28 male, is so heavily disabled mentally that he was the constant target of abuse from every kid he came into contact with. My eldest brother and I were always being attacked because we were simply related to him. But he can't be blamed, as apart from school and the odd trip down to the local warren with my other brother and myself never left the confines of our grandparents' garden. I was talking to my sister about it one day. I was about 6 or 7 years old at the time. I mentioned how the only good thing was that they simply didn't know where we lived. Little did I know that was a mistake. The next day she showed up with over 20 of the worst kids and led them into the front garden, which was surrounded by trees and an 8-foot-tall hedge, and loudly called my brothers and me out. We very rarely saw my mother as she slept in a tent in the front garden, and was out all day every day working to get us our own home again. As such, my 80-year-old grandfather went out to see what was going on. When he saw that they not only began tearing up plants and breaking garden furniture, my nan and I used to spend my days off of school planting flowers and looking after the garden, so this pissed him off. They also took everything they could out of the tent my mother lived in. They then began squaring up to my grandfather, and one even pushed him. It was at this time my older brother, now 31, appeared as if from thin air. He's always been on the heavy side, but he sent these kids scattering with ease. I don't think they even hurt him. Then began a standoff between them at the garden gate as they threw stuff at us while we waited for the police. The entire time my sister, who couldn't have been more than 13 at this time, was leaning on the wall across the road smoking, laughing, and shouting for them to just jump the gate and get in the garden again. This ultimately ended up with kids coming to our home daily, running in the garden, stealing things. Quite a few times I'd be sitting there with my disabled brother chatting, and kids would just run into the garden and start beating us black and blue. My sister's laugh was always close by. If you were lucky, my eldest brother would respond, but if he wasn't there, we would just have to sit there and take it until my gams would shout at them. He even started keeping walking sticks he didn't need by the front door just in case he needed a weapon. She would also regularly call my mother and tell her that my brothers and I were out breaking windows and stealing from shops. As I mentioned earlier, there was a good few years where we saw her maybe a handful of times a month. And due to us being poor and my sister stealing from her godmother, even after she passed away, she was the only one with a phone. I can't say about my brothers, but due to her influence I had no friends in school, and my older brother having severe anger issues meant that apart from my cat and my grandparents, I was completely isolated. So when my mother would appear and begin to scold me for things that hadn't happened, only things made things worse for me. It took me years to get over the thought that I wasn't good enough for anyone, and just caused problems wherever I went. She also began lying about being attacked and bullied in school, leading my mother to stop working and run to her side in school. This would not be the last time she lied about things of this nature. My grandfather passed in 2014, so I moved in with my nan to look after her. After a year, my sister offered to move in with the kid and her boyfriend if they could stay in the house after she passed. My nan agreed. As stated before, my nan and sister hated each other. It was only a matter of time before she split with her baby daddy. She came to live with my mother and I, and this began the worst year of my life. We eventually got a new home, and my sister refused to move in with us, staying instead with a family friend. Which I don't remember having an opinion on at the time. I simply didn't want anyone to notice I was alive, let alone put forward an opinion. And my mother came home one night over the moon that she had made 100 pounds. I don't remember how. But she said we would go out the next day as a family and have fun. My mother woke us the next day and couldn't find her purse, that she kept by the front door. We spent the next 5 hours tearing the house apart looking for her purse. Then my sister walked in and asked why the house was turned upside down. When my mother told her, she began to help look for the purse. For about 30 seconds before finding it, she claimed it was on the table by the front door. The table at this point was in the living room and in many pieces, as I had taken it apart to see if it had fallen down the back of the drawers. My mother took the purse off of her to find no money in it. When she asked where the money had gone, my sister replied, "Opie probably took it, he's always been a little thief," and walked out the front door. My mother, for many years before and after this, believed everything my sister said as gospel. So while my brother stood up for me, it was no use and I was punished. A few weeks later, I was painting some Warhammer at home when the house phone rang. It was my mother. She claimed my sister was a few minutes down the road and had just been attacked. My mother asked that I run down and take care of her and bring her home. So I did. I took off sprinting as any good brother would do. I was an army cadet at this point, so made it there in maybe 3 minutes. She was leaning on a garden wall smoking and began shouting abuse at me for not being our mother. She then punched me in the stomach and began walking towards my home. After getting my breath back, I followed. She hid herself in the kitchen and I sat down at the folding table I had set up by the front door to paint some more Warhammer. I don't know why, but she pulled me out of the chair I was sitting in, kicked the table over and pinned me to the wall by my throat and began screaming at me. I can't remember what she said. Only that I was terrified. Being 11 or 12 years of age, I didn't know how to react, and her arms being longer than mine, I couldn't reach her to help myself. My mother walked in through the front door, and she dropped me, claiming I was trying to attack her. My mother believed her tears and I was sent to my room. None of my Warhammer models survived, looked like she stamped on them afterward. My eldest brother Steve was also an army cadet, and was perhaps the happiest he would be till he met his now life partner. He had a group of friends and my sister failed multiple times to turn them against him, going even so far as to join the cadets herself to try and turn them against him. When all else failed, she claimed that one of the group had raped her. Nothing came of it, as he was halfway across the country with my brother at the time it was supposed to have happened. Either way, my brother, being a good brother, decided to believe his sister, and many of his friends went their separate ways. This is not the last time she would claim someone raped her. My mother has several debilitating disabilities and thus had a drawer in her room filled with prescription painkillers. My eldest brother had moved to Utah a few months prior, and I began getting flash headaches. A blinding light for a second and then hours of throbbing pain. Thought I had a brain tumor. Turns out it was a trapped nerve and I'm fine, lol. But after a few weeks of pain, I finally asked my mother if I could have some painkillers to help me sleep. She of course let me. The next 7 years I would be routinely asked why I was taking so many pain meds. I always told her I wasn't. After the headaches were fixed, I did not need them. But they kept going missing. Pots full of them at a time in some cases. And being as only my disabled brother, and I lived at home, it was easy to blame me. Eventually, my brother got moved to his own flat on disability, and it was just my mother and I at home. And for a while things were good. I'd cuddle my now old black cat, named Baggers, and watch TV with my mother. My sister got with an amazing man who I love very much and moved in with him. This wasn't new, as she was moving from one man to the next as soon as the family friend kicked her out at 18. But he stuck around longer than usual. My mother told me one day that she may be splitting up with him, and was quite upset about it, as she too really likes him. The next month she got pregnant. When I went out for a drink with her boyfriend, he got really pissed and confided that he didn't understand how it could happen. She was on the pill and he always wore a condom. She now has 2 kids with him, and they are separated. It was shortly after that she claimed a man she was working for was sexually assaulting her on a daily basis and got the police involved. Of course, they found no evidence but turned my nan's house into a fortress, welding plates over the letter flaps, setting up cameras, and reinforcing all the doors and windows. This drove my nan insane, saying that she'd lived in the house since it was built over 60 years ago and had never felt scared. Probably because my granddad was a beast of man, but you never know, lol. The man she claimed did all of this is her new current boyfriend who looks after her kids. I was working from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in a warehouse as a janitor. I was a supervisor with one team of 2 doing the work of 10, except my staff didn't do the job and all my complaints fell on deaf ears. Meaning I had to come in early and finish late to get all of the work done. Not so bad. I could always come home after 13 hours of work and sleep, right? Wrong. My sister moved the kids in with her, and every day would wait for me to get home. Wait for me to settle in bed, then kick my bedroom door open and throw my now awake nephews at me. This went on for 6 months. Getting maybe 2 hours of sleep every 2 days. And cycling an hour and a half to and from work didn't help either. About 3 months and my mother met who I now call my stepdad. I love this man, a mechanic, farmer, carpenter, you name it, he can do it type of guy. turned our back garden from a patch of mud into a place to sit in the sun sheds, decking ponds you wanted. He made it. And just like my Nan, he figured her out immediately, and from day one was defending me. I lost my job at the warehouse and was working part-time as a barista and looking for an exit door for my life, when an old friend contacted me from South Ireland. "Look, Opie, I know you lost your job and you're going through a lot right now. I've got a job, and I've got a bed for you. They'll pay for your ticket, just get over here." And with a day, maybe 2 considerations, I took him up on the offer, and his brother came over to collect me. I was there maybe a week before my mother phoned me crying her eyes out. Turns out that after I left, she lived alone with my stepdad. Her pills kept going missing, so she set up a trap. She bought a safe and put all her remaining pills bar 1 bottle in it. She knew my sister was dropping by, and when she went to use the toilet, she took the pot. As my mother went up after she had left and finally knew I was innocent. 7 years of suspicions and arguments, driving a wedge between my mother and me. It opened her eyes. And in turn, I opened up. I bombarded her with every single problem I have ever had. Every time she punished me for her lies or her stealing things. 20 years of hate poured out of me, a bit like here now I think about it. The only thing I never understood was why she always made me her target. I once told someone that I had great instincts and knew if a person was a bad person simply by looking at them, and to this day I've never been wrong about a person, and when I talk about my sister, people often ask, "Do you have that ability because of her? Is it that you see aspects of her in people and that's why you instinctively hate them?" And if so, I can thank her for one thing at least. Sorry for the ranting of this. It was only going to be a small rant, but once I started I couldn't stop. The pain and suffering she has brought to not only me but my family. Even my saint of a grandfather who loved everyone hated her. And that takes a lot. I thought the man incapable of hate. But as I sat and listened to him in his final months, he proved me wrong.